Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're diving straight into a massive, frankly unsettling shift that's touching families all across the globe right now. There is this profound debate raging about the modern family, and we're going to unpack some truly fascinating insights from psychologists, sociologists, and cultural observers. Essentially, we're looking at how modern therapeutic culture might be unintentionally redefining the family unit itself. It seems we're suddenly prioritizing separation, hard personal boundaries, over traditional goals like resilience and reconciliation.
And it really all boils down to one super uncomfortable question. Are therapists to blame for the rise of adults cutting off their parents? Because all throughout the Western world, adult children are initiating family estrangement at rates we have literally never seen before. Parents, psychologists, everyday cultural observers, they're all increasingly asking if this is just some natural cultural evolution, or is it perhaps a direct byproduct of the modern therapy industry itself?
Section 1. The shift in healing. From repair to removal.
To really understand this shift, we first have to look at how therapy has actually evolved over the decades. For most of the 20th century, therapy largely asked, okay, how can this person become stronger while preserving the relationships that can still be saved, right? It was all about building resilience within your existing family system. But today, well, the underlying assumption seems to have totally flipped. The question has increasingly become, who wounded you and which relationships should you just leave behind? So instead of resilience, the focus often shifts straight to avoidance. Which brings us to this incredibly powerful observation by family therapist William Doherty. He warns that therapists can unintentionally become what he calls exit counselors. What he means by that is the therapist's office sometimes serves primarily as a place that just grants a client permission to end relationships, rather than a space to really sit down and carefully examine whether those relationships can actually be repaired. When the focus is almost exclusively on one single person's emotional experience, it becomes so easy to lose sight of the entire family system.
Section 2. Therapist's new moral authority. The therapist as the guide. So, how did we actually get here? Sociologists like Karl Pillemer point out that traditional community pillars, we're talking extended family, church, tight-knit neighborhoods, those have really weakened over time. And into that vacuum, therapists have quietly become society's new moral arbiters. But here's the catch. What happens when modern therapeutic values, like prioritizing emotional safety and self-protection, completely collide with older historical virtues, things like duty, sacrifice, and the willingness to just endure uncomfortable family dynamics? It creates a really profound ethical dilemma for us. The legendary author C.S. Lewis actually captured the gravity of this shift perfectly. He noted that every civilization chooses its priests, its guides. Today, for sure, those guides often sit in consulting rooms. The ethical danger pops up when one privately hired professional, who, let's be honest, only ever hears one side of a really complex family story, holds such unchecked influence over whether a family stays together or breaks apart forever. Section 3. The language of trauma. When labels become verdicts. And this therapeutic influence hasn't just stayed in the consulting room. Honestly, just look at your social media feeds or group chats. It might totally shock you to know that hashtags for toxic family and related terms have literally billions of views on platforms like TikTok. Clinical terms have completely escaped the therapist's office and flooded our everyday vocabulary. Words like toxic, narcissist, or gaslighting are now thrown around to redefine ordinary generational family friction as severe psychological injury. Psychologist Joshua Coleman notes that assigning a parent one of these heavy clinical labels often functions as a final verdict. It traps them in the villain role and makes any good faith reconciliation feel emotionally dangerous to the adult child. Journalist Abigail Shrier has this fantastic way of framing it. She points out that a label might start as a lantern, giving victims of genuine, dangerous abuse the vital vocabulary they absolutely need to escape. But it can very quickly turn into a cage. It spares us the hard work of seeing a complicated, imperfect human being who's simply made mistakes, and instead reduces them entirely to a clinical diagnosis that just cannot be argued with or forgiven. Section 4. Incentives of open-ended therapy. The business of healing. Beyond just the language we use, we also have to look at the structural mechanisms here, the actual business of healing. Can a business model that strictly relies on returning clients really remain entirely neutral about when treatment should end? We're left with this dangerous contrast in how success is measured. Is success a client feeling continuously validated week after week? Or is the true clinical goal to build strength so the client becomes independent and resilient, able to navigate conflict without relying indefinitely on a professional? If open-ended therapy becomes the default, The client might stop asking, "What do I think?" and start asking, "What will my therapist say?" This creates what is basically a closed dependency loop, which is perfectly summarized by this really powerful analogy from C.S. Lewis. When a client cuts off their family, they become isolated. That isolation increases their dependence on the therapist for validation, which in turn justifies the continued separation. The healer may begin by helping a person stand, but the danger really comes when the healer becomes unwilling or, frankly, structurally disincentivized to let go of the person's arm. Section 5. The societal ripple effect. Normalizing no contact. So let's zoom out. What actually happens to our communities and our overall social stability when going no contact is normalized, when estrangement is no longer a last resort for severe abuse, but just a routine tool for managing personal discomfort? Well, the collateral damage is massive. The hidden costs ripple outward like crazy. Grandparents lose grandchildren, siblings are forced to divide and choose sides, vital caregiving networks for the elderly or sick just disappear, and crucial intergenerational memory is entirely lost. Sociologist Karl Pillemer makes this really stark point. One broken family tie fractures an entire social network, creating costs that society as a whole is going to bear for decades. So, if permanent estrangement carries such a heavy societal and personal cost, what's the alternative here? William Doherty suggests that managing family conflict doesn't have to be this strict binary choice between accepting complete abuse or going entirely no contact. There is absolutely a middle ground. Doherty outlines this practical framework he calls a ladder of responses. Basically, before jumping straight to permanent separation, there are intermediate steps you can take. You can start by requesting a clear, concrete change in behavior. You can set a narrow, very specific boundary. You can simply reduce the frequency of your visits, or even just shift to using only written communication for a while. You can try mediation or family therapy. These steps allow for necessary boundaries and self-protection without total abandonment, It keeps the door just slightly ajar for a healthier relationship down the line. Now, it is absolutely crucial to note that escaping genuine, dangerous abuse is critical, and therapy is an absolute lifesaver in those instances. We aren't taking away from that at all. However, as C.S. Lewis so wisely noted, avoiding all discomfort leaves us without the very relationships that teach us how to love, how to forgive, and how to be resilient. We do not preserve the self by refusing every burden. A healthy society needs clear permission to leave danger, for sure, but it also needs strong, compelling reasons to remain through difficulty. So I'll leave you with this. Will we remember the difference between ordinary human discomfort and actual danger before permanent separation becomes our only answer to pain? It's a pretty heavy question, but it challenges us to reconsider our own thresholds for conflict, and it really asks us to think deeply about the long-term future of the family itself. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.